reshape technology giants' business. Well, those were the biggest stories in the week. You're still watching Business Week, coming to you from our studio. Coming up after now, we have more to discuss. Please stay with us. In case you're just joining us, you're watching Business Week, coming to you from our studio. Well, let's get into our conversation for today. The Nigerian economy is poised for a transformative shift as President Tinubu's administration recently approved the sale of crude oil to the Dangote refinery and other local entities in Naira. This groundbreaking decision marks a significant departure from the traditional practice of denominating oil transactions in foreign currencies, primarily the US dollar. This initiative is expected to create a more stable and predictable pricing environment for both producers and consumers. Now, for more perspective, I'm joined by partner and head of arbitration and commercial litigation practice at law firm of Tayo Yetibo. Mr. Mufesomo Tayo Yetibo joins me now. Thank you for your time, Mr. Tayo Yetibo. Let's get into the conversation now. Mr. President recently directed that crude oil be sold to Dangote refinery and other refineries in Naira. Well, the reason is simple, and I'm sure you know that, to help stabilize fuel pump price and the dollar-Naira exchange rate. What's your understanding of these, and how is this likely to change market dynamics?
Thank you for having me. I think that this new directive by Mr. President has come about because of the obvious challenges that we have had in the country over time with availability of products. So specifically, I think in this case, that directive related to PMS, to the market. And we may have also noticed in the last few days, there have been queues, at least I have seen queues in Lagos, I have seen in Abuja myself personally. Mr. Dangote has also been in the news recently, just trying to shed light on the fact that he's not been able to get crude supply for his refinery. And so there had been that tension between a refinery that was set up by Dangote for the purpose of trying to aid in ensuring that we have regular supply of products into the country, and at the same time getting feed for the refinery. And so it looks like what has happened now is we've seen a compromised position between the government on one side and Dangote refinery on the other side to try and see how some sort of guarantee can be put in place for supply of crude to the refinery, so that there will be a follow-on guarantee on the other side for supply of PMS to the Nigerian market.
Well, as you're aware, this initiative is expected to create a Naira-denominated market. Some analysts are envisaging that this is supposed to impact the value of the Naira. That's one. So how is this likely to strengthen the value of the local currency against major foreign currencies? Additionally, you also know that Nigeria relies heavily on earnings from crude oil export. How do you think this will impact pricing structure of crude oil in Nigeria, both for producers and consumers alike?
Honestly, I don't think that this transaction dynamic will result directly. Perhaps there may be some indirect factors why the Naira may strengthen, but I don't see a direct line between this transaction structure and a strengthening of the Naira. Because the crude is being Naira denominated for local consumption and not for international consumption. So you're not, for the purpose of crude sales, purchase and sales, benchmarking the Naira against any foreign currency in the international market. Everything is happening within Nigeria. Everything is happening within Nigeria. It's been done within Nigeria. And so I don't see that we would see a knock-on effect on the Naira in terms of the Naira strengthening for that reason. Also, the Naira, I think, strengthens when you have a strong productive market to back it up. And doing crude sales in Naira does not instantly mean that you start being productive in other market sectors, right? And so I think that what we will just see is that the transaction for selling crude to Dangote refinery and for selling on the finished products, in this case PMS in particular, into the Nigerian market may become easier, may potentially become maybe a little bit more stable, but I don't see that we'll start seeing Naira gaining against the international currencies just because Dangote refinery or any other refinery for that matter is buying crude in Naira.
Well, the idea of this initiative, as stated by the federal government, is that this will increase demand for Naira. If this position is true, then isn't this supposed to strengthen the local currency? Let's look at possible measures the government can take to manage the interplay between oil pricing and currency value in this initiative.
So I think Naira demand is increasing, but it's increasing locally. It's not increasing internationally. Nobody abroad is looking for Naira to try and buy crude or buy anything else. And then also the way I see it is that if you have, so the story is that we spend a lot of our foreign exchange to chase importation of petroleum by way of subsidy and such other things, and that at the same time we earn most of that foreign exchange from sale of crude. So whatever crude that you are not selling for USD, you are not making USD in that respect. And on the other side, you're not having to spend that foreign currency to chase the refined product. So you may see some leveling out in that respect. But what again, I think you may also see from the markets is that if that gap opens up in terms of demand for dollar to buy refined products, you may find that other sources of demand will plug that gap. And so it does not mean that that demand that you have now, in quotes, potentially saved from not having to spend dollar will give you freedom to use that money in a different way, because A, you're making less because you're not selling crude in dollar on the other side. So I think that those changes, if at all, may be marginal, and that was the reason why I said there may be some other factors that may interplay with this factor to see that Naira strengthens a little bit, but I don't see a direct line between this transaction and Naira strengthening.
Well, there are conversations around the need to enhance Nigeria's position in the global energy market and attract foreign investment in other sectors of the economy. Well, is Naira-denominated oil market a plus for Nigeria or a minus when you look at the risk associated with fluctuating global oil prices? Recall the federal government signed an executive order to unlock about a $10 billion investment in the oil and gas sector, sometimes in April.
I think in everything there's some risk inherent in every transaction. In this case, I think the risk would be that the government is trying to create a previously non-existent market, Naira market for crude, which is ordinarily a product that is denominated in dollar. And so when you are creating a new market that did not previously exist in a currency that has never been used for that type of market, then there's some risks that some of which may not be readily ascertainable today that you may see. In terms of the things that we know now as potential risks, I would say that the volatility of the Naira ordinarily against the dollar means that you need to continue to track the price of even the Naira price of crude, so that you don't have a situation where you have a wide deficit or a wide surplus between the traded price of Naira crude and what the actual value of that crude is on the international market. Because what that will entail is we're going back to a place of full-time subsidy, because that shortfall or that surplus has to be met up, or it has to be made good ultimately. So I think really that's the principal risk that I see, that we're creating a new market using a new currency for a product that is ordinarily denominated in a different currency. And we should not have a situation where we have a locked-in price for a long-term period, and there is no price review mechanism in place that enables the that domestic sale of crude to sort of mirror a little bit what is going on in the international market for that product.
Well, point made, but the expectations is that when local players buy in Naira, it means they have to sell in Naira to the marketers, right? So will this drive down the pump price? Additionally, what strategies do you think the government needs to implement to ensure a stable and transparent regulatory framework or regulatory environment?
So I think that in terms of whether it will drive down the pump price, I think what I would say is that it makes it easier for the pump price to be controlled. If you leave the pump price entirely to market forces, I don't think that the pump price will come down. Because if the Naira price that crude is being sold to Dangote refinery is still benchmarked against the dollar price, the dollar rate, and Dangote applies his typical market economics into his refinery operations, and then you sell, I think that the depot price would not be lower than what we have today. The only thing that you have done is change the currency from dollar to Naira. The only way that I see that you can have a lower price is if the government is selling crude to Dangote or any other refinery at an undervalue, in which case you're delivering the raw product to Dangote at a price that is below market, where he will still apply his regular market economics for his refinery, which in any event are dollar denominated, and then sell. So which is still a subsidy that you're not necessarily paying for in cash, but you're paying for in crude. But the problem now is that as of today, we know that Nigeria is underproducing, and we still have the issues of our forward contracts for crudes that are in place and I think are unexpired as of today. So there's no excess crude to use to subsidize a scenario where you give Dangote refinery crude at an undervalue. And so if that is the case, then I don't think that you will see lower PMS at the pump at the end of the day, because you can only achieve that if you have excess crude to sell at an undervalue and that you can use crude to make up shortfalls.
Well, I want us to wrap up on this. The issue of monopoly comes into conversation here, and there are concerns that local players in oil and gas might be sent out of business. Now that you have a key player like Dangote, what kind of regulatory oversight would you want to see in place to ensure a more competitive market?
So the first thing that I think is that I think the messaging around this Naira denomination of crude sales could have been better. I don't think that it was ideal that in coming out with that messaging, Dangote refinery was put at the forefront of that, because Dangote refinery is not the only local refinery that we have in Nigeria. We have other smaller refineries that operate in the country. And so when you put a policy in place that, yes, you say applies to other refineries, but you put Dangote refinery at the center of it, it sounds, or it signals to me anyway, to the market, as if you are suggesting that you have put in place a policy for Dangote in a market that contains other market players. So I think that messaging could have been better. For instance, to say we want to now, because of crude supply challenges to local refineries, we are going to denominate crude sales to local refineries in Naira. And then you put in place a regulatory framework that allows any of those players to go in and bid for the product or apply to have product allocated to them based on a clear set of rules that they can follow, and whoever it is can take whatever volume it is available, they take in a market where there are other players. And so I think that the NUPRC and the downstream and midstream regulator, the authority, need to have a clear set of rules that allow other players to come in. If it is easier for a smaller player to take that crude and be able to supply product to the local market at the best price, then those guys should get that crude rather than Dangote. If Dangote can do it better, then give Dangote that allocation. So I think that those regulations should be made, number one, and two, they should be made clear enough for everybody in the market to be able to follow and it should be such that whoever it says is best placed to give best value for the crude that they are taking in Naira should be the person who gets the allocation. I think that's the way the regulatory framework should be designed and should work to give confidence to the market.
Well, I think a good place to leave it. Mr. Mofesomo Tayo Yetibo is the partner and head of arbitration and commercial litigation practice at law firm of Tayo Yetibo. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show this week. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your weekend with us. I am Frank Omalape. Bye-bye for now.